first trailer for Star Wars Episode 8 has been released, and people are buzzing, myself included. I'm excited, everyone's excited. I figured, hey, why not put my hat into the ring and do a trailer breakdown? First of all, thank you to everyone who joined me on the live stream and who watched the premiere of the trailer along with me. I think there were about 3,000 of us at the peak. It was a ton of fun, so guys, keep an eye out for next time that happens. And this trailer is fun because there's a lot of little details to pick up, which actually tells us a lot about the movie. So anyways, let's go through it and take a look. So the beginning of the trailer is interesting because I think it's intentionally made to look like you're looking at a planet from space. It looks like there's stars, and the ground actually kind of looks like Coruscant or some sort of metropolis, but then you see, of course, that it's just Rey. And this kind of continues the Star Wars trailer trend of opening with a bit of a surprise. If you remember, the first trailer for The Force Awakens had Finn pop his head up out of nowhere. So now on to the training scenes, of course, which ends with Rey with her hand down, obviously using the Force, and we've kind of heard of this scene before because it was shown in the sizzle reel a few weeks back, so it's nice to see it for ourselves.
Now, reach out.
So next we got the scene with the map, and this is interesting because maps have played a big part in the sequel trilogy already. Of course, in The Force Awakens, the main plot point was trying to find the map for Luke Skywalker. It's also interesting because we heard from the panel that after the attack on Hosnian Prime that the First Order heavily and aggressively assaulted the New Republic and the Resistance. So perhaps Leia, and I'm just going to assume that this is General Leia, is looking at some sort of tactical map. So next we see Kylo's helmet on the floor, and some people thought maybe this is Darth Vader's, and I can understand how you would at first glance, but if you look closely, it's clearly Kylo's, and that's interesting because everything we've seen so far has him with his mask off, so I kind of wonder whether he's, rejected this mask and chose to show his new scar off instead, which we'll also see in just a second. So this next scene is interesting, and it's accompanied by Rey seeing that she sees the light, the darkness, and the balance, and this is kind of a motif that we see throughout this trailer, and it's actually kind of hard to understand what we're looking at here. We get a close-up of some sort of book, and it's got the Jedi Order symbol on it, and some people have theorized already that this may be the Journal of the Wills. We're not sure, but it's clearly some sort of important Jedi document, likely in a cave or a temple of some sort. We also see a gloved hand on it, and I've been trying to figure out who that is. We don't think Luke and Rey are wearing gloves, and from what we've seen, they're not. So perhaps it's Kylo Ren, or maybe even someone that we haven't been introduced to yet. Then we have another shot of Rey, and although it was hard to tell in the stream, she is using the blue lightsaber, not the green one. Then we have the AT-AT scene, and this scene is interesting because it kind of confirms that the rumors that we've been hearing are most likely true because there are some walkers in the background, and I think that they're probably intentionally far away so we can't tell that they are the AT-AT variants that we've heard about so far, not standard walkers. And of course, there are these really interesting ships, which some people have, I think, rightly compared to pod racers, and I'm not sure what they're doing. They've got some sort of flare or some sort of smoke coming out behind them, and perhaps that's to indicate to the fleet in orbit where they should do an airstrike or something. At first I thought it was just normal like smoke or normal dust being kicked up, but it's clearly some sort of chemical agent. Or at least they're very intentionally kicking up dirt because you can see some sort of mechanism scraping across the ground. Next we have scenes with Poe and Finn, of course, is in what looks like a back-to-pod, but also kind of like a cockpit of some sort. I mean, I'm going to assume it's the latter, just based on the fact that his eyes are closed and that we know he suffered some pretty major injuries. And then Poe and BB-8, two fan favorites, running through the hallway, and then towards an X-Wing. And then the X-Wing explodes, and again, we've heard about scenes like this in leaks so far. The hangar scene also shows us the tail end of an A-Wing, or at least some craft that looks an awfully lot like an A-Wing, so it's kind of nice to have the confirmation that it's not just going to be X-Wings in this trailer. And actually, there is another Republic ship that appears later. I'll get to that in just a second. So we've got a kind of generic shot of the Millennium Falcon. I mean, I like it, but there's nothing groundbreaking about this. Same with this next shot of Rey running, although this confirms for sure that she's holding the blue lightsaber and not the green one. Starting to seem more and more like this is her lightsaber now, and she's not going to return it to Luke, although that was probably expected. Kylo Ren, and interestingly enough, you can see the scratch over his right eye. It's not as big as many people speculated it would be. And I mean, he took a lightsaber to the face, so I'd say he's healing fairly well. And again, we see him without the mask, and he does look a bit more menacing without his mask on in this trailer. And I mean, maybe I'm overanalyzing things, but it almost seems like he doesn't need the mask anymore to be evil, because in episode 7, the mask is kind of a front for the conflict he's feeling within him and the light kind of pushing against the dark. But in this case, at least in this scene, just looking at his eyes, there's no question where his head's at. Next, we have two shots which, although put next to each other chronologically, I don't think are actually related. So the first is Luke and R2-D2, and it looks like they're looking at a burning down Jedi temple. So this seems to me like it's a flashback to the attack by Kylo and the Knights of Ren on the temple. Although some set leaks have actually shown a building kind of similar to the one shown here, so there's also a chance that this is a present day, or this is something that will happen during the movie. And next is Captain Phasma and some stormtroopers walking through another burning scene. And again, I think that this isn't actually related to the one in the previous shot, just because this one looks like it's inside of a spaceship or something, where the other one is clearly outside and clearly in a temple or some sort of less high-tech location. So next is my favorite scene, which I'm just going to let play through all the way, and I'll kind of cut back to some interesting parts, because it's kind of hard to stop this scene and really get a closer idea of what's going on. It's more fun to just watch it all the way through. So we see some new ships, which are really interesting, and they kind of, at least to me, evoke some feelings of the old Republic. But there's a lot of them, and there's also a lot of fighters. I've combed through this scene, and I don't see any new form of TIE fighters, nor are there new TIE fighters in the earlier shot with the Millennium Falcon. We also don't see any sort of First Order fleet, but I mean, there are a ton of New Republic capital ships. Presumably they're capital ships, so there must be a fleet somewhere. This shot also confirms that the leaks we've been getting so far are true and accurate. I was emailed by a viewer, Nikolai Brawen, who very astutely noticed that the bottoms of these capital ships have the kind of lat gun turrets which I mentioned in my Super Star Destroyer video. So if you look closely, you can kind of see that there's a glass shell with a turret at the end, and again, that lines up exactly with what we've been hearing the New Republic ships would look like. And it also kind of gives us a bit more sense of scale for these ships, and they're really not huge. There's also a planet below, but I mean, there's no way to know what that is. It's just, it looks like it's probably an Earth-like planet, but I mean, that could be anything. This could just be, a regular confrontation between the First Order and the Resistance / New Republic, which isn't that important in terms of story. And during the panel today, they kind of suggested that the film might open up showing clashes between the New Republic and the First Order, so I wouldn't be surprised if this were maybe even the very first scene of The Last Jedi. Nikolai also pointed out that if you pause at just the right moment, you can see what looks like a cross between an A-Wing and a Jedi starfighter. It's the red ship that flies by. So this is interesting, and it's kind of nice to know that it's not going to be just X-Wings in this movie, because that gets a little tired. And then probably the most important scene of the entire trailer is Luke Skywalker saying it's time for the Jedi to end. And this is interesting because it kind of calls back to one of the first shots in the trailer where Rey says that she sees a balance between the dark and the light. And really, since the Last Jedi name was announced, people have been speculating that this is kind of where the movie was going. In the prequels, we learn about the flaws of the Jedi Order and how it really failed Anakin and really the galaxy as a whole. It seems to me like Luke is probably training Rey in his own way, so not purely as a Jedi, obviously not as a Sith or anything, but something more in the middle, something a little more gray. Anyways, guys, that's it. That's a full trailer. Not a teaser, but a full trailer. And it's kind of nice that it didn't spoil anything for once. I know a few people were a little underwhelmed, and that's what kind of happens if not a whole lot of plot is shown off. But personally, I liked it. I liked the new ships that I saw. I liked those weird pod racer things. And it just seems like this movie is going to be a little more unique than The Force Awakens was. Also, damn, was it not good to hear Luke Skywalker speak again in a Star Wars movie? Really, the only thing that I'm disappointed about is that we didn't get to see any of the Knights of Ren, and I mean, I completely expected that, but really more so we didn't get to see a whole lot of new ships. I mean, we saw the New Republic capital ship, but we didn't see any new TIE fighters, we didn't see any new Star Destroyers, we certainly didn't see the Super Star Destroyer that I've predicted. This trailer was also structured in a really similar way to the Force Awakens trailers, where basically you have, a minute or so of high content, like talking between the characters, setting up the plot of the movie, and then you have shots of just individual scenes, which are really high action. Anyway, what did you guys think of this trailer. After watching it, are you more pumped or less pumped for The Last Jedi? Let me know down in the comments below. And hey, if you enjoyed, please subscribe. Along with a ton of content from Episode 8, we've got some Star Wars Battlefront 2 stuff coming, and just a whole lot else. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. As always, may the Force be with you.